Well, welcome, folks. Thanks so much for coming in for our Public Service Perspectives presentation today. For those who are online, I do want to ask that you remain muted throughout the session. Feel free to turn your cameras on, though. We would love to see your faces. I know it's lunch. That's fine if you're eating. We are going to do Q&A towards the end, so you can use the chat to drop questions throughout the presentation today, or just use the raise your hand feature at the end, and we'll call on you to ask a question out loud. I also do want to acknowledge we have a new hire here with us. So I'm the event coordinator for the past 5 years, and we have Rebecca Koronowski who's joined us. So I want to introduce her and say I'll be passing the baton in this guest lecture series to her very soon. So she'll be taking over. It's been a pleasure running this, and I'm so excited to be ending my tenure here with Gwen today. One last reminder is this session will be recorded, so it'll be available in our video library in the coming weeks. At this point in time, though, I'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to Leslie Hoylman. She's with our Partnership for Community-Based Prevention to introduce our speaker today. Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today in person, and those of you that are joining us online. I have the pleasure of introducing Ohio alum Gwendolyn Woods. Gwen has served Ohio for over 32 years as a criminal justice professional at the city, council, and state levels. Her state tenure with the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction encompassed a variety of positions which focused on assisting individuals prior to and or during their reentry from prison. Gwen was also an inaugural member of the leadership team that was tasked with the design, development, and expansion of the agency's offender workforce development efforts. This initiative included working with employers across the state to promote hiring and retention of individuals with a criminal history, thereby providing them with the opportunity to become productive tax-paying members of Ohio's communities. While she officially retired from public service in 2016, Gwen continues to advocate for criminal and social justice issues and works with a variety of public and private entities. In fact, I first met Gwen through the Mansfield Urban Minority Alcoholism and Drug Abuse Outreach Program, which she serves as an executive leadership team member on our Ohio Children of Incarcerated Parents Initiative. And what I appreciate about Gwen is her passion and dedication to Ohio's families, especially those who may be negatively impacted through incarceration. She is also actively affiliated with a variety of professional and service organizations and remains passionate about advocacy as it relates to equity, social justice, and service to the community. Gwen also states that her most cherished and rewarding roles are those of wife, mother, and grandmother. She and her husband, in fact, met and became best friends on campus here in 1982 and will celebrate 33 years of marriage this year. Gwen is also a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta and is still active in the Columbus, Ohio alumni chapter today. So with that, would you please join me in welcoming Bobcat alum Gwen Woods.
Thank you, Leslie, for that wonderful introduction. I am going to say thank you for Leslie for that wonderful introduction. And I also want to say thank you to Tracy Flower and to Dr. Rapper for nominating or suggesting or that I participate and speak in this, giving me this opportunity. I hope you don't regret it, but I really do appreciate that. Today is almost, as she stated, like a full circle experience for me. Having graduated from here, from the university, during our college years when you don't know what you want to do, I started off as an accounting major and switched to sociology because I quickly realized for me, I needed that human involvement. I cared about people, and I switched my major at that point in time. Secondly, today is important to be able to come back to the Winovich School because, as Leslie mentioned, I've had the opportunity to work in several inaugural non-traditional or alternative corrections programs. And one of those was the Offender Services Network that then Governor Gwendolyn started. It was his vision that we develop services and resources and start to prepare people prior to their release as they transition. So those two things, it's I think it's just, this, like I said, for me, it's a career coming full circle and doing this today and having experience, having had the benefit of working under that administration is wonderful. So we'll start in the essence of time. I want to first state that I'm not going to be the person today to give you a whole lot of stats, numbers, that kind of stuff. This is a topic that for most people is very difficult and hard to understand. You know, most people, we have to have laws, we have to have prisons, we have to have jails. It's understandable. But on the second side of that, we have to be prepared. We have to recognize that the impact that those things have, the impact that they have on our system when we do those kind of things. So everybody, we're going to start with here with this social determinants. These are things that everybody wants. I don't care who you are, how you're raised. Everybody wants a good job, good career. Hopefully that job will turn into a career. We want economic stability. We'd love to live in nice neighborhoods. We want good schools for our family and our children. We want to have access to good and affordable health care. And that's something across the board that we all desire, regardless of your circumstance, regardless of the background that you come from. And these things are also some of the things that become obstacles for individuals who have been part of the criminal justice system. Collateral sanctions, as you hear, those are legal and regulatory sanctions that are imposed upon people once they, as a result of their conviction and or their incarceration. So some people might have a conviction, never go to prison. You know, those people might serve time in jail, they might be on probation. Those who serve time in prison will have, they have that felony conviction on their record as well. So whether they serve a week in jail or whether you serve 20 years in prison, you are now have the result. That result is a collateral consequence that will follow you most of the time in their life. Now, I always ask, is there anybody who has never committed an offense? I would like for you to raise your hand. Good, everybody knows that. I used to do that when I talk with our employers. And you know, you'd have some people, I tell them I got $20 and people raise your hand. The reality is most of us have committed some type of offense, knowingly, unknowingly. You know, we've written a check that is bounced. We've taken some pencils or pen from the office. You know, any small thing, it doesn't matter big or small. The reality is we have committed an offense. And if we look at that from that human perspective, we realize that it could happen to anybody. The only difference between most of us and people who have served time is that we didn't get caught. We didn't get caught, we didn't do time, we didn't get the conviction. So if we try to look at this from the human lens, which is the focus we want to try for today, I think it would help us understand the importance of these collateral sanctions and work together to try to eliminate some of these. Now, the Voinovich School's mission is to try to address some of these economic barriers and work together collectively in a partnership with state, private, and I want to say other non-traditional organizations. I'm going to put faith-based in here. There are all kinds of non-traditional people that we should work with, but all of us, it's important that we all address this issue in order to alleviate it. I'm going to ask that you excuse me today. My Ohio sinuses are kicking in big time. So out of these collateral sanctions, you see that we're going to start with the most common one that impacts people the most is employment. While a lot of people have reservations about hiring ex-offenders, I want to say that we shouldn't. Once a person's done their time, come out, they should be able to work, pay taxes like the rest of us. I don't know about you, but I want them to pay taxes and take care of their families. And a lot of these individuals have had training, they get education, they get some training. They might have had good jobs or a career prior to going into prison. Those who are fortunate enough to have a strong support circle are usually more successful with transitioning back into the community. Some of those who have not experienced a difficult time. And employment is the basis for everything. We can't do anything. There are two basics, I will say, housing and employment. I tell people you can't get a job if you don't have a place to live, but employment is going to help you keep that house and support the place to live. So employment is important here. Ohio took the step several years, and they've been actively engaged with working in this area. And they did the ban the box in 2015, where we eliminated that on the application where people could ask you whether or not you had a felony conviction. So that was an effort to try to level the playing field. However, as you go through that process, there's a time and a place you will have to do, in some cases, do the background check, but you cannot technically eliminate or disqualify someone because they have a felony conviction. And that's taken some years and years and a lot of work by a lot of people. And I think it's a testament to Ohio's ability to work collectively. That work has involved the people with the bar associations, it involves employer groups, getting out in front of them, talking to it, and individually having them work one-on-one to get this to happen, because most people were fearful of what if they come and they steal something, or what if they do this, and despite having incentives like federal bonding and those kind of things, there's always that what if factor. So the ban the box was instrumental in helping eliminate some of those kind of things. The initial effort started with as a partnership with the faith-based organization and the departments of Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. And those two coming out, you had a large faith-based organization advocating for the hiring of these individuals. And they brought employers in where they sat down and talked about the benefits. They shared with the training, all of the apprenticeship programs and trainings that goes on inside of the institution, and to encourage and promote that. Now, I'm not here advocating, not speaking on behalf of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, even though I had wonderful years there. But I can share with you that the experience was wonderful. As part of that job linkage and its later term to offender workforce development, I had the opportunity to work with employers. And what it started off with breakfast, like I said, with encouraging them to hire. Then we started to interview the individuals prior to their release from prison. Then we started to meet with them one-on-one, where they were allowed to interview that person, look at that resume, and decide, yes, when you get out, have you come in to see if we can get hired. My philosophy is I did not want to overburden one employer and just send everybody there. It's important as part of workforce development that we match individuals based on the skills, the talents that they have, along with what particular skill that employer is looking for. And so with that mindset, we were able to do some things. We would place people one person at a time. I'm not going to give out a list. I'm not going to just send everybody there, because then that employer is going to say, you know what, I want to do a good job, but this is too much. That's okay. What we found is that working that one-on-one and even doing some job coaching with the individual, once they were placed with that job, most of those employers told us that hire was one of the best people they had. And you know why? Because that person appreciated the second chance. They wanted to get up and get to work every day. They wanted to do a good job, and they really valued that job. And those folks sort of inspired, and it was up to the employer to reveal or not reveal whatever they wanted to do. But the employers overwhelmingly stated they appreciated it. So that initiative, that allowed us to grow this effort. We never posted anything, and it's continued to evolve. It's continued to evolve. During that time, I also met a lot of people who had been out of prison 15, 20 years and were still impacted from something that happened a long time ago. So it was important to work with these people as well. So the network sort of grew and expanded in some non-traditional ways. The unfortunate part was money, budgets. You can't hire enough people to do this. And if you start hiring people to do that, folks are concerned about, what about me? are you giving jobs to people, these folks, and they're taking away from jobs from my child? Which was not the case, but anyway, it's something that people, it's something that we have to, you have to be cognizant about. So, we're talking about the need to disrupt the disrupt this and prepare individuals. So why is it important? Why is this work important? It has an impact in some major areas, and I mentioned we saw some of the collateral consequences, but the bigger impact is much broader. I stated it has an impact on the community. When we have these people that are housed and incarcerated, they're away from their families. These are people that we now have to take care of. There's a large amount of money that is spent housing individuals, housing and feeding individuals, as opposed to having them out in the community doing something impactful and productive. And part of that system is, and part of the whole incarceration system, we have it's a community issue. We got to look at some of our structural and systematic systems that were in here. And the Health Policy Institute of Ohio did an analysis in the annual report and stated that Black Ohioans were 5.6 times more likely to be incarcerated than their white counterparts. And that's just here in Ohio. And this was in 2021. So that's a sign that we've got some things that we need to do. It impacts the community because then we have limited educational and economic opportunities, and that whole over-policing piece and racial profiling and surveillance is another piece that impacts negatively the minority communities, because while they're more likely to be arrested, more likely to be convicted in a system that is supposed to be impartial, the stats don't reveal that. So that over-policing, surveillance, racial profiling, and the slow delay while they are over-policed in the case of when they need emergency response, sometimes that's a lot slower. So the police are slow to respond to emergencies in some communities, but they're quick to over-police in that area. The impact on the family is huge. When a parent goes to prison, that household now becomes a single family unit. And if there are generational other family members that can help with that, basically there's a one parent household. And if there are multiple children, as in most cases there are several children, now that person might have to work 2 to 3 jobs to take care of the individual. So that's a huge impact on the family. So if mom is now in prison and dad has to work 2 or 3 jobs, try to comb his 2 daughters' hair to get them ready for school and pack a lunch, and dads don't normally do hair, but they got to do all of these things to try to get the kids ready and take care of that family, that's a huge impact on them. Yes, you might be able to ask grandma or another relative to come there, but it's also a strain. It just compounds. It goes from one person to the next to the next. So those are things that we've got to look at. If you look at, when go back to that community piece between that family and the community, there are usually already stressors on those 2 units, because the family now has to try to engage other people to help. And something as simple as going to a grocery store now becomes a challenge, because in most of our neighborhoods, those grocery stores are pretty close. We're probably within 10, 15 minutes most of getting to a grocery store. Well, in some neighborhoods, in the majority of the neighborhoods that are now impacted by this, they're food deserts. So again, another opportunity for us to work and look at this from a human perspective and work on addressing some of those social ills that impact the family. Are there any questions so far? Anybody has any? Well, I'm clicking too fast, obviously.
Do we need to go back one?
For the purpose of today, what I want to focus on is the impact on our children. Now there is a lot. We all know the data that states that children who have a parent or someone in the household that is incarcerated are more likely to serve time, do time, and end up in the same place. And as a community, I think it's really important that we start to look at some of this. And as you go through the chart here, and like I said, I want you start to look at some of these things. We talked about your generational embodied, the historical trauma. And the trauma that most of these children have, which they call adverse childhood experiences, impact their growth, whether it starts from, and we're going to define children as from age 0 to 17. It impacts them. So if I'm living in a household and I'm 5 years old and mom is in prison or dad is in prison, I've gotten used to going to the institution, hearing doors clink, seeing them for a period of time, not being able to touch them. That has impacted my psyche. That impacts my mental health. That's impacted my social development. While I might love my parents, but this is how I get to see my parent, which is different than my family or other classmates. So I have to live this life differently than my counterparts. So the social conditions of which they live, some of those traumas, that whole experience is something that most children do not experience. So if I'm in a play group and I happen to be in a play group, or even simply being at school and sharing, okay, what did you do this weekend with your parents? Now becomes an issue. Do I really say that this weekend I went to the prison to visit my mom and dad? Or do I make up something so that I fit in? So that child at an early age is starting to develop some defense mechanisms, if you will, to try to fit in, but to try to explain something different to explain their normal, which is not normal to most people. So as they go through this, you get into your social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. If this is something on a regular basis, as they move to maybe the teenage years, so we're not saying it's an absolute, but as they move to those teenage years, how do I cope with that dysfunction? So I might start getting into more risky behaviors. I might start getting high. I might start smoking pot. I might start skipping school. I might explore some things and get into things I shouldn't. I might, I want to be a grown up. If I got to take care of my 4 kids, well, then maybe I need to act like I might get into sex or any number of things. Those are all risky behaviors, things that are not normal for children, but those are adverse things that continue to grow, add on, and impact that child in their development. These individuals usually have little or no pro-social interactions or activities. If one parent is incarcerated, that parent has to work, the other one has to work 2 or 3 jobs to keep things afloat. So there's little time to go to the park, go to movies, and do some of the non-traditional things that most of us do. School, they've got to do different things. After a while, they try to, they just sort of give up. It doesn't mean that they're not smart. They just sort of give up. I remember reading, going to a school. I was involved with a group and we did some reading with children in middle school. And this was 6th grade. So they were reading to us. And one little girl told us that week that we would come in, or the day that we would come in, was one of her happiest times, because at home she had to dummy down, and she couldn't read at home to anybody else in the house, because they was just like, oh, why you want to read this book or whatever, those kind of things. So all of those kind of things are detrimental to children in their growth. The reality is that it does take a village, and I know it's an old saying, but it does take a village to work and address some of these things. So all of these adverse experiences are things that can negatively impact a child's growth as they move through the system. Now, let's go back to our system here. While we have jails and prisons, there are also a lot of alternative options that are available, and I think Ohio is at the forefront of some of those things. We have drug courts, we have diversion programs, we have treatment in lieu programs, and all of these are programs that are designed to take a person that has been arrested and charged with an offense to allow them to go through treatment, programming, maybe community service, or number of things, instead of going to prison. And those things are very, very instrumental. And I think if we look at the numbers of people that we have incarcerated, utilizing and trying to develop, more of those alternatives will be a win-win. Now, with our current drug situation, the drug courts are pretty prevalent, but we don't even have a drug court in every county yet. Diversion, some of the low-level programs. I worked with the prosecutor's office in one city, and any nonviolent misdemeanor offense went through mediation, where we sat down, we had both parties that sat down and tried to work out an amicable resolution to resolve that problem. That freed up time in the court dockets, that freed up time in jail space, and any number of things. So it didn't take people away from their community. It allowed them to keep their jobs and go to work, and it allowed us to resolve that problem. And those things that the agreement stayed on file, if they broke it because it was with the prosecutor's office, then that person ran the risk of being arrested and going to court for that offense. And so those kinds of non-traditional alternative programs, I think, are very, very important for us. And I would encourage us that we need to look more, not just at the criminal justice system, but as members of our communities and in whatever job we have. Whether you're a social worker, people expect you to do it. But if I am an accountant, why can't, and I understand the math and the budget and the numbers and how this is impacting them. It's up to all of us to look at ways that we can take some policies or what we can do to try to work to diminish, or I won't say eliminate, because we're always going to have people in prison. Some people need to be there. But to minimize the people, there are a lot of people that deserve to be there, need to be there for a long time. But the majority of people are going to be released and come home. So what can we do? If this is a small likelihood that this person is nonviolent or something else, we need to look and see if we can't do something else, if there are not other sanctions and options that are available to us. Now, I would venture to say that most of us know somebody at this day and age that is impacted by this. And with the drug crisis, initially, when in the late 80s, early 90s, when we had the crack epidemic, we went through the crisis of building prisons, putting people, locking them up. We're now in the midst of another crisis, the fentanyl crisis. But at this point in time, the difference is that we're treating. It's an illness, it's a sickness. Now, if you look at the way we see things has some whole disparity impact. The crack epidemic impacted a lot of minority communities. It tore it up in some places, and it was devastating. And it wasn't just the people who were low risk. I saw people who were doctors, lawyers, very prominent people in the community that I worked in at the time on crack, and their other significant crack and didn't know it until the time they were at the point of losing a house or something detrimental, cars and those kind of things. And it had a huge devastation. But at that time, we didn't have a whole lot of these alternative programs. So doing more of that thing and sitting back and looking at it, I think is another opportunity for us to do something different. Now, as we talk about, I'm going to go on to with our children. And I'm going to talk about a program here that, this is my clicker's going. This we get to brag a little bit here. In 2018, the Urban Minority Alcohol and Abuse Program, and along with a collaboration of people that included Ohio University and some others, the Department of Mental Health. So you talk about a non-traditional partnership, that's a state agency, that's a university, and it's a local nonprofit. Got together and worked to submit a grant, and they received the grant to do the training of creating lasting family connections. And we recognized it was important for all of the things that you saw before. We were having severe drug problems. You had people coming out of prison that weren't ready or weren't able to immediately transition back into the home or whatever, for whatever reason. So this creating lasting family connections training focused on providing training and developing skills. Those skills included communication, conflict resolution, because most people never learned really how to deal with conflict. If you grew up in an environment where all you heard was cussing and fussing and slamming doors, that's how you thought you dealt with it. But during this curriculum, people were provided with the opportunity to get the tools and training to learn how to effectively communicate with each other, how to share that I'm not feeling well, or, I don't like this. When you do this, I feel like this. So they got to practice, and we started in the institution at 3 different institutions here, 1 male or 2 male and 1 female, where they worked with this training was implemented. So this is while the parent is incarcerated. They went through the training, they got to utilize these things, and it's an interactive training. So they got to practice those things with each other. This grant allowed Ohio to implement the family component, which meant that at the same time as the parent was going through this training in the institution, the last 5 weeks of it, the child and family members were going through the same pieces, learning those same skills on the outside. And during the time, we were impacted by COVID, so you had to run around and figure out something else. But because of technology today, we were able to video conference or Zoom. We did this video conference was the old technology. Zoom is the new technology. So the parent and the child were able to both participate, learn these skills, and they got the opportunity to practice those things with each other. So just imagine that for a minute. If you can sit there and imagine a parent getting some training, the child on the outside, and then the both of them communicating and working on utilizing those skills together. The results have been wonderful. They've shown improvement in several different areas, and the report, there's a link to it, but they improved areas in the area of communication skills, conflict resolution, intrapersonal skills, as well as their emotional awareness, their expressions, interpersonal how they deal with each other. Those things, all of those things improved to the point that many of the children that have participated, once the program was over, have asked, we want to keep doing this. How can we keep doing this? So, we're looking at now, how do we keep doing it? But it was beneficial to them and helped them in school. Most of them, the parents reported fewer discipline problems, better grades, all of those kinds of things. So again, that's something that's born out of a non-traditional partnership. And, those kind of things work. We just have to sort of give it a chance, take out the barriers, and let's see what we can do here. Last year, during the summit, and I'm going to put a shameless plug in here, is that we are having the second Ohio Children of Incarcerated Parents Summit. Is April 16th and 17th, and everybody is invited to attend. You can register at ocip.org. Registration is still open. But last year during that conference, we Zoomed the participants in. We chose one of the institutions, and the participants at the conference were able to talk with the family. So the family, whether it was the father, the mother or significant other, and the child, were all there together, and they shared their own impact of how this impacted them. And I don't think there was a dry eye in the place when people got to realize the human impact of that. To see a child actually touching his dad, because Maurice, this is, you can't do it. She's touching his dad. One little boy just couldn't stop touching his dad. There was a teenage daughter in there who hadn't spoken to her father in a long time. Her mother reported that even she was doing better, and she was reluctant to participate, but she stated she was glad that she did. So those kind of tangible results are things that are, again, the non-traditional things, but they're important things that we have to do as a community, because now that parent, when they leave, they've already started that family engagement process prior to them leaving prison. They're connecting with that spouse, they're connecting with that child. So when they get home, it's not like, oh, you haven't been here for about 5 years, you can't tell me no. You know, because now they've become a regular part of the life. So you're seeing this. We had in our recent cohort, there was a group, we had one group in, two groups in Columbus. One group worked with middle school children on the west side of Columbus. They had several children in that group who had parents that were incarcerated. They had other children who had so much dysfunction all over the place. And the group that was doing it is a faith-based group. That organization, their community development board, was the one that is working on this. And after going through it, the kids gravitated just to the facilitators, and the facilitators were surprised how open these children were. Again, because they didn't have anybody, you know, to have somebody that they're seeing every week. They know they can count on that person that's going to be here, that, you know, for this hour and a half, it's all about me. You know, not to mention I might get some food or something in it, but they were very open. And so our facilitators have been shocked at how open this were. And we're working with them now to, they're going to do a training with the school, because some of the things they recognize during that things, you know, there needs to be more connectivity within the school, so that at school, they are aware of what's going on in the child's life. We have one example, excuse me, a young boy who, it was obvious his grandfather was his most instrumental person in his life. His father is incarcerated. I don't think he lived with his grandfather, but he had regular interaction. Long story short, the grandpa died. This is this kid's world. So he didn't get to school for a couple of days. But instead of, you know, someone reaching out to find out what had happened with him when he came back, he was suspended. So again, that's an opportunity for us, because we need to be able to, you know, there should be somewhere or somebody in the school, and I know that people are overwhelmed, teachers are overwhelmed, the guidance counselor, but to suspend a child who just lost the most instrumental person in their life is another tragedy. That's a traumatic, could be another adverse traumatic experience for that child. You know, so we expect he's supposed to come back to school now and just pick up and get good grades. You know, when you didn't have any empathy for me when I was going through this. So again, looking at ways that we can do some of these things. And it's good that the church is available to work with them to do this, because like I said, I recognize teaching is a hard job. They got a lot to do. So, but thinking about how we can invite and enlist some of the non-traditional partners in this effort to make sure that our children, because our children are our most valuable asset. If we mess that, you don't get a second chance to do that over. And these are the people that are going to be running the world. So we need to do everything that's possible to take care, to nurture, and make sure they grow and develop as responsible and productive adults. We have another group, the last group, and I'll share, and then we'll wrap up for questions, that works with high school students. Again, these were kids who had some learning challenges or discipline challenges in a local high school. And I got to witness this as well. The bonding that they had when they came in, and the cohort was finished. But out of the 10 graduates that graduated from that program, 8 of them came in that day that I was there for a site visit. They come in regularly. The facilitator, I love you, tell them what's going on. They went and got lunch, they come back in there and sit down. Again, this is somebody now, they've established that connection with somebody that they can talk to, they feel, let them know what's going on, and they use those tools to learn how to communicate. When this happens to me, I feel like this way. So all of these things are important. So I share this to say, just to summarize, back to one minute, that we all have a responsibility We all have a responsibility in this to help as this piece of change in lives, because prison impacts folks in negative ways. That whole conviction, whether you never go to prison, it's still that conviction impacts people in negative ways. And I say this, on any given day, it could be, except by the grace of whatever God you serve, it could be you. So I think my perspective as a public service, a former public service person, but as a resident of this community and somebody that wants to make this world and this place a little better for my child and my grandchild, we've got to start. My perspectives are one, we got to recognize we're all part of one race, and that is the human race. If we consider our humanity, have a little empathy and understanding and compassion for each other, we can come up with different ways and we can work together to fill in those gaps. Most of our kids, if they play with anybody, usually you have the opportunity to interact with some kids and you can see when they're missing. They like coming to the house because they're always there. Pay attention and let's fill in the gap where we can for each other. I'm not saying that you got to do it for everybody because it's not realistic, but where we can, let's fill in that gap. We've got to also remember that everyone should be given the opportunity for redemption. And that means giving folks a second chance. If you're in a situation where you can hire somebody, do that. You don't have to publicize it, just do it. If that person has the skills, the training or whatever, and can be part of your team, do it. If you don't have a business, but you know that person has that, be an advocate for that person with somebody else, If you know somebody that's looking for a job, hey, such and such is do this. And if I can go in and put in a plug for you and be that advocate, let's go do that. Mentorship and support, and we hear that all the time. And it's not a cliche, it is very important. It's vital that we have that. Linkage services are vital for folks. So having us is not just the jobs of jails and prisons to prepare and do all of this. Most people tend to think, oh, well, that agency has X billions of dollars. They can pay for this. Once that person gets out, it's not their responsibility. So they're part of our community. So we need to do all that we can for as long as we can to try to help make sure that person gets what they need, and then I can't do it all. You can't do it all, but help that person, have them navigate through the process and through the system so that they can get to the point where they're able to be that productive person that most of them will really strive to be. Resource agencies must be willing to provide these services, and they've got to start to look at some of the non-traditional things. It's just not a person who has insurance. What are some other ways that we might be able to help this population, even for a person who doesn't have insurance? So I would end by saying that the person you serve today could technically end up being a service to you tomorrow. The person that you impact today could have some impact on you tomorrow. We never know. So let's remember this and try to figure out and be as human as we can, figure out what we can do, what can be our little part in this world, in this city or in this state to help make it better. Okay. Well, any questions?
I'll start. And Gwen, you did a fantastic job. You raised so many good points. But the question that's sort of top of mind for me, my husband volunteers in a prison near us, and he has noted many times that it's difficult to identify volunteers from the Black community because there is this institutional trauma in many cases, even if the individuals who are being asked to serve did not actually, serve time, there's this trauma around the topic, and it's difficult to find mentors, for that reason. And then oftentimes, in rural parts of the state, there are not large numbers of individuals, of underrepresented populations. And so I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts, given your vast experience of, how different sorts of organizations that are serving individuals who are incarcerated might think about their volunteer outreach in a creative way.
That is an excellent question. And I'm going to tell you my challenge. I've said it for years my pastor got tired of hearing me saying it, but I think it's one of the first places we'll start is in our church congregation. You know, working inside the prison, outside, you know, people say, oh, our church, every church has a prison ministry. And usually what they do is they go in once a week and they do Bible study. That's wonderful. But these people really need help when they get out. So if I'm going into a church once a week and have a Bible study with them, I should have the opportunity and likely have developed some kind of rapport or relationship or understanding with somebody in that group. And if you didn't, then shame on you. But making that kind of connection. So once you see a person, you've been, you know, volunteer with them, what can we do in the church? Each church, like I said, has a prison ministry. Somebody in that church congregation has a person that is in prison. So let's start with there. Having churches, you know, sort of understand some of these things, go through some of the training, identify what resources are in there, or start to link with other entities and agencies. Because again, that's a church and they're saying, well, that's not what we do. It's not what you do, but if you've got people in your congregation that are impacted by it, let's see what we can do to start being that mentorship. So when Joe comes home and comes to church with his grandma, instead of everybody looking side-eye, I'm like, that's that child that got out of prison, you know, he did such and such a thing. We need to be there welcoming Joe when we come to the church. You know, finding out what he needs. Does he need some clothes? Do you got a job? You know, do you have a resume? Some of those kind of things, because we got sitting in these church pews, we got all kind of people with all kind of expertise in there. So that would be one place I would start, I would suggest. A lot of civic organizations are now doing some of these kinds of things. A lot of sororities and fraternities are going inside, doing in-reach. And so again, that's an opportunity for them to start. And if you identify somebody that has something, or you make that connection with somebody, and I make it a legal connection, but once that person comes out, then, you know, find out. You could talk to their case manager to find out, hey, when does this person get out? You know, he seems like this. What are his needs? Because all of those individuals get some kind of assessment about what their needs are pre-release. And so if you decide that you want to be an advocate or work with it, those are their opportunities to do that. The department has a whole volunteer section where, you know, they can go, an organization is interested in signing up to do that. So that would be my start, my 2 cents. But that's a great question.
So we have a few that have come in on the chat. Someone has asked, I think their name is Siri. How can we get involved with getting this word out to the community? Excellent question.
It's everybody on here today talks about it and thinks, you sit down and think about how can I make a difference? So who do you come in contact with? Start by going to the department's website or going to the Ohio Children of Incarcerated Parents website and looking at what's going on around in those areas. You can reach out, you know, and like I said, you could start with church. You'll be surprised. Most of us are only about 2 people removed from somebody being incarcerated that we know, 2 to 3. So within this room, I'm just to use that, you know, all of us know somebody that's been impacted by incarceration, whether it's that parent or whether it's that child. Start right there. You know, start with the child. If they're, you know that their parent is struggling and having a hard time, what can I do with this child to make sure that he's exposed to some pro-social activities and relationships and sees that and can experience that.
That person also followed up and would like to have your contact information, so we can arrange that.
Showing on that last slide.
Yeah. Another one that came in online, Shauna Gibbs Ayers. How can we help the K-12 students of an incarcerated parent? Any suggestions on agencies that we can partner with? The Girl Scouts have the Beyond Bars program, but don't know about programs for boys.
Well, as I've stated, we've got 2, and I believe she is in the Columbus area. We've got 2 entities that are just working now with a cohort that are working with girls and boys. One of the high schools has a chew and chat that they've started, where they've just informally started to gather the guys and talk with high school boys, which is, you know, phenomenal, and talk about what's going on in their lives. So those are some of the kind of non-traditional things, but if she can reach out to me, then we will work to try to link them up with some additional kinds of service, because it is much needed. There's not just the one place where all of this starts. Most of the time, it's going to start with us trying to figure out some things. And so we all have that power to start to think, how can I make a difference? How can I volunteer? Or if I have a nonprofit, or, you know, if I'm involved with a nonprofit, it might be you talking to them, saying, hey, you know, we need to, maybe we should consider doing this. Maybe we adopt a school and we can start to do some of those things. So that would be a great place, I think, to start.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room have questions? I have a few more online, but we can trade back and forth.
It's a quiet group in here. They're just my moral support.
Yeah. So another question, can you speak on jury participation and the importance of representation from all demographics?
Ooh, that is a loaded
That's a big
and
one.
very important one. Well, as you have to be in order to participate in a jury, you have to be a registered voter. And that is one of the things that in Ohio, I went past that, but people who have been convicted can vote. Ex-offenders or people who've been incarcerated can vote here in Ohio once they get out of prison. So you have to be registered to vote. It is a random process, but when you are selected, make sure you get there to do it. You know, because that's where they pull from, the juries. They use the voter registration roll. So again, it is important, extremely important, that we vote.
Thank you. Someone wanted to share with you, very insightful, my toddler son is being adopted out of the system and is a product of incarcerated parents. So,
Oh, wow. Bless you.
yeah.
We need more people that's where it starts.
That is where it starts. I had a question. So the adverse impacts you were talking about, are there ways that those things are being measured? I would assume having information and data on how those are showing up in the kids' lives, and also potentially how they're compounding on each other, you know, because it's all related. Are there programs or processes in place for getting the information on what impacts are happening?
And good question. I'm going to do a plug. I will encourage everybody to go online and get the Health Policy Institute of Ohio document. They have, they do a variety of research in a variety of topics. And one of them is the connections between criminal justice and health. They've got a litany of it. But the document that they had there was very insightful. And I'm trying to think, do I have their website information? I know we have a hyperlink in that adverse piece to that chart, but
Okay.
it's the Health Policy Institute of Ohio. And I mean, they have a lot of information.
Great.
So
Yes.
workforce development is my, so my question is how important is educational training for incarcerated individuals, has shown the importance of release and the impact on families when people are released.
You said how has it?
Has it been impactful for families to have that education and training while they're incarcerated when being released and an impact on being returned to a family?
I don't have any recent data, but I'm gonna just tell you that yes, it does. I can't. That is one of the highest drivers to reduce the recidivism. A person having a job is far less likely to recidivate and go back to prison. Because having that job, having the income and money is going to keep them from doing things, you know, looking to alternate things where they got to get money in non-traditional ways. And I will say, as part of workforce development, we used to focus on getting people jobs, but it's like, it's not just getting a job, it's keeping them in the job. Because what we found with this population is they have so many other ancillary issues. You know, okay, I can get the job, but they have a plan for what happens if my child is sick. So do I have a plan A, B, or C if the baby gets sick? Because I just can't not show up to work because my child is sick. But they haven't been programmed to think like that. So having some of those kind of things are important. If you're in that workforce area, I don't know if your agency or entity has job coaches, which we found that was really instrumental with helping with that retention. Somebody that was going to mediate. And the example I will be, we get Amy a job, you know, we talk with the employer. So like after 30 days on that job, we go out and talk with the employer. How are things going? Is Amy working well? If there are any problems, can tell us what they are. At 60 days, we're going back. But also in between that employer knows that there's somebody that they can contact to help work and navigate through that so that we can help work with that person prior to them just being terminated from the job. You know, if they got an issue, let's see what we can do to work with them to keep them on the job, you know, especially if they've been a good employee for a time. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I was just curious with like recidivism, whether it's like personal or like systematic oppression, stuff like that, if you guys have like certain ways that you address the trauma that goes with that with family, like if family members keep returning to prison.
I'm not sure if there is any kind of data. And I would encourage you to maybe look on the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections website. They might have something like that. Or even in, I would venture to say that Health Policy Institute, because they have a whole lot of stuff in there. I got really caught up when I was researching on that, but they have a lot of information that is helpful. Usually, what I can share with you from experience is, people usually, they have to want to change. That's the first part, because cycles and trends, unfortunately, we have some people in prison that's generation. I go to prison, my dad is there, I got uncles and cousins and my boys from the hood that are there. So they get there and it's not a bad thing for them, it's a badge of honor. But as people get older, then they start to say, I can't keep doing this. And I've heard people tell me, I've had people tell me, Ms. Woods, I'm tired of this. I can't keep doing this. And so then that's when that switch clicks and they decide, I've got to do something a little different. And so then they're going to start to participate. And then if when they said to me, hey, I need you to do something different, well, what are you doing? What program are you in? I'm going to check. I'm just that person that was always going to check, whether I had you under supervision as a parole officer. If you didn't have a job, I was going to be at your house at 8 o'clock in the morning. Are you up? Where you going? Okay, stop by my office and let me know where you put the applications in. On my way to work. In prison. If you say that you change, okay, what program are you in? And I'm gonna check to follow up and make sure they're going to some program and you're doing something. Are you doing it or are you just delivering lip service? So the biggest thing is they've got to decide that they want to make that change. And usually when they decide, and usually it's when they get older, they'll tell you, I'm too old for this. I can't do it. And they just age out because the next problem that they're facing is older people in prison. Dealing with older adults, and that's another whole issue. Prison is not made for older people. Sleeping on bunks, living in a dormitory is not ideal for somebody. I would say even at my age of 60, I wouldn't want to do it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't climb up on a bunk. I wouldn't want to climb up on a bunk, listening to all that noise. So, the individual has to really make that decision, but that is a great question.
Well, Glenn, I want to thank you so much. I want to be respectful of your time. I know
Okay.
we're a little over time here. There's just a lot of folks in the chat, echoing their thanks for you. And a lot of folks invested in this work already. There's some fair chance employers in here, people with other reentry programs. So a lot of great networking going on online. But thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come down and speak to us. It's
Thank
so
you.
much valuable information, and agree that everyone should, get involved in this work. For those who are here and online, we have our final public service perspective session of the semester coming up on April 19th. We'll have John Corlett here. So please mark your calendars for that. Also, if you don't have anything going on tonight, the sustainability film series is going on up at the Athena Cinema. So join them for The Great Green Wall. They're doing a showing. Awesome.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
all for being a great audience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.